The Mandalorian episode 23 just dropped, and we got so much new lore and some really impressive tie-ins to the past that I just need to talk about. In today's Mando review, we're going to tackle things a little bit differently. Usually I like to focus on one key topic and break that down. Today, however, I just want to go over my thoughts on the episode in a more chronological manner. Before we begin though, I do just want to give a massive apology to anyone who joined the live stream last night. I unfortunately, about 15 minutes in, had a complete power blackout in my neighborhood. It only lasted for about a couple of minutes, but then when I got back and got the stream running again, I had two separate internet failures. I'm so sorry for wasting your guys' time, especially so early in the morning. I felt so bad. We are, however, going to try to do another stream for the finale. General first impressions on the episode though, I thought it was really great, and I do feel like almost elements of this episode could have been sprinkled throughout the season to make a more even experience all around. But when it came to plot progression, I really felt like this nailed it for me. My only issues were really in some of the directing and writing, but we'll talk about that as it comes. Let's start off first with the opening scenes. This was so cool. We see the resurrection of the Imperial Remnant / First Order Shadow Council, and this actually ties way back to the Star Wars Aftermath trilogy. In the days after Endor, the Empire forms a Shadow Council made up of high-ranking Imperials and warlords from across the galaxy. Now, the Shadow Council is actually dissolved during the trilogy, but it's clearly been reformed here at some point, and the state of the Empire here is very interesting and something the show hasn't really explicitly addressed, arguably at least until now. So after the Battle of Jakku, we see the most loyal members of the Empire flee into the unknown regions alongside one of the individuals we see in this scene, Brendel Hux. Brendel Hux is, yes, the father of Armitage Hux from the sequel trilogy. He's an Imperial hardliner, and alongside the other Imperials who flee the galaxy, helps create the First Order. The highest ranking Imperial in that group is Grand Admiral Rey Sloane, and I gotta admit I was a little disappointed not to see her included in this scene. She's been a pretty prominent character in the new canon expanded universe, but it's pretty easy to understand why she wasn't included. It's much easier for the casual fan to recognize that this guy is an ancestor to Hux, and the explanation surely is just, well, she was too busy. What's a little strange, or I guess not strange, but I guess a change in the lore, is that the First Order, the Proto-First Order rather, is now still helping the Imperial Remnant within the galaxy. That takes us to Pellaeon, and man, I was so excited to see this man included in the scene. Pellaeon is one of my favorite Legends characters. He was of course name dropped in Star Wars Rebels, but I just love to see him on screen here, and they absolutely nailed his appearance, his mannerisms, his loyalty to Thrawn. It's just great. I'm guessing that Pellaeon falls more into the Imperial Remnant class of people, those who stayed within the galaxy rather than fleeing to the unknown regions, and it seems like he's liaising with the First Order, but out of all of them is the most dedicated to Thrawn. It's kind of interesting to see Proto-First Order Hux working together with Pellaeon and even Moff Gideon. There's a very interesting relationship there between really everyone on the Shadow Council. I hope we learn more about who the other council members are. We could very well have them be named Zinj, Dala, whatever, and we'd get sort of a similar situation to Star Wars Legends, where pre-Thrawn invasion, we saw more of the warlords actively working together and giving their forces to Thrawn, as he was the best chance of returning Imperial rule. Again, I know I'm focusing on the scene a lot. I think it's important. It is just sort of weird that the First Order guys even want the Empire to return, but I think we'll see more about their motivations moving forward. Moving on though, onto the Navarro scenes, I absolutely love the shot of the fleets over the city. I thought it was so cool. Honestly, all of the ship shots looked absolutely spectacular in this episode, as they have throughout the entire show. So this time and time again, Lucasfilm has clearly figured out something about how to make ships look good on a TV show's budget, and it's just astounding, really. All the way back in Andor, really, they've just been nailing it. One interesting thing I noticed is that after the Mandalorians grouped up and decided to travel to Mandalore, we see that the fleet is comprised of the Imperial cruiser plus 5 Gazantis. However, when they come out of hyperspace near Mandalore, one of those Gazantis is missing. I wonder if we are going to see Boba Fett and other Mandalorians appear in this subsequent episode, the series or season finale rather. Is it possible that the other Gazanti has went off to fetch them? Also, one of the big leaks early on in the season was Grogu using IG-11 as sort of a mech, and I hated the idea. I thought it was going to be so cheesy, but it ended up being hilarious. As someone who has a kid, just the idea of what my kid would do in public places if he were stronger than me, I thought was well reflected in the episode. Him just hammering the yes and no button was so funny. I actually thought they nailed that scene in a way that was surprising. It could have been really bad. The middle of the episode was definitely a bit of the slower part. I feel like they could have spent less time on the surface of Mandalore, more time getting straight into the Imperial Imperial base. I do think it's pretty likely that the armorer ends up being some sort of spy for Gideon. I thought some of the dialogue maybe around Din Djarin and Bo-Katan was a little bit clunky, but to be honest, I kind of expect that of the show. My first, I guess, complaint comes after that with the general writing and directing. I think it's well summed up by this monster. Like, why is there a monster here? There's no need. Everyone's already heading for the mines. The monster doesn't really do anything. It just feels like something this season has used time and time again when the writers aren't sure what to do. We saw it with the giant turtle, the bird. It's like, how much megafauna can one man encounter within a month? It's just a bit weird because they were already heading down to the mines anyway, and if the concern was destroying the ship, well, they could have done that with TIE bombers or something. I don't know. I think it's possible that this ends up being some experiment or creature created by Moff Gideon, or it ends up being one of a million reasons why they decide not to stay on Mandalore. Just a bit weird for me. And rewatching this episode, I was kind of wondering whether there is the potential that they just leave Mandalore. I do like how they got Gideon involved again, how he's using the Mandalorian mines to outfit his new super commandos. But yeah, the action also wasn't necessarily the most compelling. I don't think it was bad, but it was a lot of, run down this hallway, go here, fight guys, take some shots off your armor. It is what it is though. Next episode, we should have a space battle going alongside this. I think that'll be great. I also am kind of wondering whether the New Republic could end up coming to help the Mandalorians when they find out that an Imperial remnant force is here and is active. When it comes to Gideon, I actually feel somewhat vindicated with what he said this episode. We know the Empire and First Order have big cloning programs, Project Resurrection. That'll probably lead to the Snoke stuff, but I was always pretty convinced that whatever Gideon was doing was more for personal advancement, and I think that was played out in this episode. As the others are using cloning for the greater good of the Empire, he wants to create a personal army and also probably improve himself. One thing I thought was a bit weird is the new Dark Trooper model. Like, it says explicitly in episode 16 that initial Dark Trooper models used an operator, then they moved to the new Dark Trooper, which was all robot. Now they've returned to having an operator, and it's seen as like the final upgraded version. I guess that's somewhat similar to what happened in Legends, where the very first Dark Troopers were based off old clones, then they had the mechanical version, then the Phase 3 Dark Trooper, as we see used by General Mock. Some of the action around the end too was maybe a little contrived, Din Djarin being out in the open and being captured, them doing nothing, but again, it's kind of what I expected of this show. I still really enjoy it. I've got to say, going into the finale, I'm a little worried about Din. I think there's the real possibility he doesn't make it out of this season. I actually don't mind that he's sort of taken a bit of a back role to Bo-Katan, but I hope those rumors about Pedro Pascal not being happy with the show aren't true, and that he's back for the next season and beyond. I would love to see the show focus on him a bit more now as it's set up sort of this big galaxy spanning conflict, which can be picked up by Ahsoka and whatever else. I also want to mention the Praetorian guards. I thought that was really cool. Obviously, they're earlier versions of the guards compared to what we see in The Last Jedi, but I love that they absolutely dummied Vizsla, who had just taken on like a dozen of the new generation of super commandos, whatever they are, just without a sweat. He didn't even come close to hurting any of them, and that just really shows how elite this guard is. Star Wars Legends had its own generation of advanced guards in this era. In both canon and Legends, there are the Sovereign Protectors. In Dark Empire, there's also the Imperial Sentinels. I love that there's such a valuable resource that they're more noteworthy than entire squadrons of TIE interceptors and bombers being moved. So when talking about predictions for the final episode, again, I think it's possible Din Djarin does die. I don't think he will, but I think it's possible. I also think it's possible we do see Boba Fett show up, but my big prediction would be the reappearance of the Mythosaur, and I think whoever rides it will be the one who ends up leading Mandalore, whether that's Bo-Katan or the Mandalorian. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Again, really enjoyed it. Not my favorite of the series, but really great. I'm glad the show is back and is finding its feet near the end. Classic Mandalorian thing to have some middling episodes in the middle. So I hope people come at the final episode with open minds, and we'll give the season a good rewatch when it's all done. But that's all for now. Again, sorry for last night's live stream debacle. I'll see you soon.